This meeting is being live streamed. Got it.
No, we've lost the connection.
You start there. I'll get my laptop out and you start presenting, and then I'll get it.
Okay. Okay. So apologies, everyone online. We've been experiencing some problems getting the presentation up on screen, and we're half there. So you can see you've got a better experience than we have in person. So you can see the presentation, but we at the moment in this room can't see the presentation. But we are physically here. So thank you everyone for joining, and thank you Angela for coming to give this talk today. Most of you already know Angela. She's a professor in human-centered technology here within our group at UCL, and is also a professor in human-centered security at Ruhr University Bochum in Germany. And again, as many of you know, she's a pioneer in usable security. Most notably, the paper that sort of set a lot of this stuff off, users are not the enemy, which significantly shifted people's thinking towards more user-centered approaches to doing security. So today, Angela is going to be giving us a talk on how we can better prepare cybersecurity professionals for their job, and what organizations should do to protect them and themselves, with a brilliant title, which I love, Guardians of the Digital Galaxy, Protecting the Cybersecurity Workforce. So over to you. Thank you, Angela.
Thank you. Do I have to just start?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. I'd say thanks for having me, but of course I belong. I still partly belong here. So thank you very much for coming today and listening. As Marcus just said, I now spend most of my time at Ruhr University Bochum in Germany, and it's basically I don't think we have these things so much in the UK. It's really what you can see there as a massive concentration of cybersecurity research, and then research related activities being located in a particular area. So Ruhr University is one, is arguably the leading one. It's got a bachelor and master's program with about 1,000 students in IT security. Not computer science, in IT security. The Horst Goetz Institute just had its 25th anniversary last year, so it was basically an industry benefactor who started by originally founding 2 professorships, a mathematician and an engineer, to work on that. One of them was my colleague Christoph Paar, who was very, very famous. And then around this, we also have various kinds of projects. So the German Max Planck Institute for Security and Privacy is co-located with the university, and we run the only excellence cluster projects. These are research projects. Again, they have to be mainly based in one academic institution. They're funded to the tune of about 35 to 40 million, running over 4 years. And the only one in cybersecurity, CASA, is the one we have at Bochum. And then around that, there's also more recently, in collaboration with 2 other universities, a big new, we're just building a new research center on trustworthy data science, 123 million euros. And we've got about 50 million a year to spend on cybersecurity startups, on basically getting them through various phases. So I don't want to make you jealous. It is
too late.
I think I just sort of basically maybe to say to some extent of like, basically maybe you understand, why it wasn't such a difficult choice in the end for me to decide to go there. Am I good now? Yeah. We're still getting rid of feedback.
Let's turn down the sound. That's right. That's not.
Okay, good, great. and that basically means what we're going to do now. Yeah. So this is basically the excellence, because the project's got 80 PIs and PhD students, and this is my human-centered security team at RUBS. That's basically me and 2 junior professors with most of our doctoral students and postdocs. So I think that's and that's been sort of really my work over the past 5 years, is to build that team from zero. Okay, but enough. Basically, like in German, we have an expression for this. We call them bragging slides. enough of that now, and on to the title of the talk. Guardians of the Digital Galaxy, Protecting a Cybersecurity Workforce. Why? Well, if you look at the difference between the Guardians in volume, in the first movie, volume 1, and the third volume, volume 3, what would you say are the differences? In volume 1, right? They're coming out fighting. They're really, really keen, and you get the feeling, right? They're very keen on their job. Whereas they're definitely looking a bit more like, oh, really? Again? Why are we doing this in this third volume? And it's really an impression that's been emerging from a series of studies we've done over the past few years. And my argument is, if you connect that to a couple of other findings and studies that have been coming, I feel very strongly that we've got a major problem in that we have a very precious resource, and that resource is being just exhausted. We need more of it, but instead we're running down this resource, and that's, to me, is one of the biggest risks or threats. So, as Mark kindly said, I started really with usable security, human-centered security. Right, what we're have been doing over the recent years is extending the perspective. So we're not just looking at the end users, be they employees in organizations or consumers, citizens were interacting with systems from home. We've been, because we look at the problems that they've been having, and then you start turning to the people who I, as a researcher, think, the users are telling me, the CISOs are the problem, or the security experts are the problem, because they don't understand this and they want to make us do that. And then, of course, it's natural to then turn to those actors and ask them from their perspective and try and find out, why are they're acting in the way they do? Is it that they don't understand? And that made us, that basically brought us to do a couple of studies with CISOs that I'll briefly summarize. And we also started noticing that more and more companies are now starting so-called security champion programs. They say they're recruiting employees in, say one per department or in a particular topic area. And they're asking, and the job of those security champions is to spend a bit more time, to invest some time and effort into learning about cybersecurity, and then both helping their colleagues, but also encouraging them, doing a bit of a missionary job in terms of persuading them. That's the idea. And it's been going on for a few years, but it's really picked up speed and become very fashionable. And that led us to look and say, well, so is this actually working, right? This is auxiliary, how are these cyber auxiliary forces actually doing when they're trying to do organizational security? The first study is an interview study with, let's start with the 2 CISO studies first, and then we do the 2 security champion studies. the first CISO study, 14 semi-structured interviews with CISOs and security consultants, who had on average 20 years experience. So these are very, very, very experienced people, and they've, you think that had time and reflect. And we're coming to this old concept from usable security, that when you get friction between the activity that the user has to do for security and the activities they have to do for their primary task, for their main job, is that we then always see the security being bypassed, and people start working around it. So our question was like, are they aware this is happening? I mean, we've been publishing this for 20 years. That doesn't mean, I've also learned this the hard way working with practitioners. Do not expect them to read an S&P or Usenix paper or whatever. They're looking at it like, what, 14 pages, 16 pages? You've got to be kidding. We really have to start basically doing extracts of our papers and getting the most important messages out there. But yeah, so maybe they haven't been reading the academic. Are they aware of it? And are they aware of its impact on employees and organizations, and how do they deal with it? The recruiting was partly via LinkedIn, partly via personal contacts. The master student who did this study works as a security consultant himself. He's got a significant number of years under his belt. And after piloting, we did this, and you can actually imagine. I mean, you say, 14 participants, but if you look at the transcripts, the length of these interviews is quite, actually, it's significant amount of text and work to do this. And then, as always, we have at least one more person coding the transcripts with us. Roughly sort of the interview guide is you warm people up by just asking, what's your background? How did you get to this? And then but it is, get them to focus on their experience with employees, their negative reactions, and say, and so what do you do about it? And we came to the conclusion, we could only come to the conclusion based on what they were telling us. We got very, very few answers where they said, and I went and I changed this and I reorganized that, I made it easier for them. What you more get is a lot of excuses for not doing anything about it. And that's really, really interesting. And the most common, it really basically by a long shot through all the transcripts was, well, the regulation made me do it. I needed to, we want the ISO 27000 certification, we got this. And so I have to do it this way. I think I had a nice quote here, I think it's actually quite nice. The goal, that is the certification, you feel you have to have it. And then, to put it bluntly, by this point, you're almost walking over dead bodies in order to get the certification. And that's why the employees just have to do it like this. And I think that's, or when you also look at some of, when the interviewer was then trying to ask a little bit more about, you very quickly, you can't push it too much, because very quickly you actually come to the point and saying like, no, it's the certification doesn't make you do it. It's you're using the certification as an excuse towards the employees to say like, no, you have to do this because we have to be certified. Where at the end of the day, you have produced an unusable solution, and you're just using the certification as an excuse for not doing anything about it. And it's basically, in German we have an expression called like the basically I'll the kill you argument, a Totschlag argument, and this is what it is. It's being taken out. It's a big thing to, if anybody questions you, or if anybody protests, you just say like, we have to do this or we won't get our certification. Then the next theme is that they're also always saying we've got a lack of resources. Yes, I would make it usable, but I don't have the resources to do it. And I think it's also very closely linked with problems with old IT infrastructure. And it's both, the security mechanisms are outdated, but often it's also the technology itself, and any of the standard mechanisms you look at, whether it's authentication or access control, and say, yes, we would like to do multi-factor authentication, but, we've got this Windows-based system. And, yes, we would like to have long, 3-4 words as passwords, but we've got this Windows system, and it only, it'll only take 8 or 14 characters or whatever, and so on. And when you start looking, sort of counting the different mechanisms, again, it's like about 80-90% of the discussion is around identity and access management. And clearly there are some organizations that are tackling this, and trying to move ahead, but particularly organizations that weren't born digital really struggle. I've had a couple of talking to some of the more experienced people about it. They say usually they like to blame the organizational leadership and says it's the board, they won't give us the money, and that's why we can't do it. But here they were actually saying, no, the board would give us the money to do it, because they can see that you might get other, that it would improve productivity overall. I've got a quote for that later on as well. But I can't find the people to do it. And basically one of those quotes, I didn't put this on the slide, but it is absolutely true. He said, amongst the security community, identity and access management is seen as a deeply unsexy job, and it's just not interesting. It's not the latest buzzword in the community conferences and so on. And it's a big, it would be a big job, and it would be a lot of graft, and people don't have the appetite for it. They don't understand. And also then they have the fear, it's like there's a lot of things you could do wrong in the process of this, and then you're going to end up the blame. And this is one I really think is the reason why we're having outdated technology, particularly around core security functions, just left. They're just left in place, and they're left to keep like rotting, decaying, less gracefully rather than more gracefully in most cases, but that's what it is, And in this quote here, sort of, he said, like, I was really puzzled, this guy really got it like back to front in my view. It's like, because really what most of the others were saying is, if we change the identity and access management system and people have fewer passwords and they don't need to log in as often and there are fewer problems, that frees up productive time, and that's a good thing. So he said, like, his argument was like, well, you can't really argue for that. It's very difficult to argue for that. No, I don't think so. And most of his colleagues really disagreed with them. I would, and also that he says with the security awareness, people sit down for 30 minutes to do the security awareness training, that time costs. My experience is the opposite, is that the time that people spend on these, again, mandatory, prescribed by the ISO 27001, by other ones as mandatory, that the cost of the time that people spend on that, mostly grudgingly, and just like, can I just get this done, please, and you ask them the next day, they don't remember any of it. That time is not factored in most organizations. So I just put this quote up here because I thought it was quite particular, in the sense that it actually goes against most of the findings. But also the most frequently mentioned activity here was basically security. When you ask them, how do you make things usable? What have you done to make things usable to work with your users? it's security awareness, security awareness. And this is a very, very, very common, that very quickly, when you ask them about how could you help your users, how could you make security easier, you end up immediately at security awareness. And that's bizarre, right? Because that is not making the solutions that the users have to interact with more usable. It's fixing the human. It's essentially like trying to somehow bash into them and persuade them that they should just suck up the workload and get on with it. Not good. And here I think this quote basically illustrates this beautifully. Well, they perceive security as an obstacle, and and really they're going like, that's wrong. So if we do more security events, maybe they will start to see that it's wrong, and that security, of course, has to have priority. At the end of the day, however much they're often, earlier saying like, yeah, of course we've got to make it easier and things like, they still end up in this place. So. And here's something like this, it's a very concrete problem. On a small screen with smartphones, you don't necessarily see the details. You need to identify phishing emails. So I was able to recommend that generally you shouldn't open links on mobile phones. Go again, it's like, no, right? I mean, if your employees need to interact, need to access things via their phones and do via their phones, then just saying just don't do it isn't the answer. But the one positive, and I think that's really telling, the one positive example that stands out, it's one of the few ones, but the ones that really gets multiple mentions, is hard disk encryption. So that's the one win we've seen, that they said that essentially hard disk encryption has become so easy, or it's become transparent for most of the users now. So we've deployed it, and all the effort that was involved with previously with manually, encrypting and decrypting data at rest has gone away. So it's interesting, and we're currently running a study on hard disk. Well, we have over a number of years looked at hard disk encryption, and we've looked at the commercial ones and looked at Veracrypt, the open source alternative, in parallel, and it is very striking, that the acceptance and that people are really happy to do it. I think it's possibly got us, well, we'll still have to see. I mean, some users are still not aware that they need to back up the key somewhere, that if the device, if the device fails, the data may be lost, but it's a win. And so that's actually, maybe we should hold that up more as actually a usable security win that's made a difference in organizations. Okay, so then look at the second study. This is so since we stick with the film theme, this is a study on CISOs and human-centered security. I call it like, CISOs on the verge of a nervous breakdown. It's a very different type. It's not go out and interview CISOs. This is I think we can call it a longitudinal study, which over 5 workshops, so 5 half-day workshops with a group of close to 30 CISOs. So we've met them in half-day workshops 5 times over a period of nearly a year. And it's what you have to do, that you basically, you can't record those sessions, right? There's no way they'd allow you to record the session and then make transcripts. So you have to start getting quite creative around this, and take, basically look at which team members you take. You need to do live, effectively, you need to have people who are very good typists and do live, create the transcripts live on the fly. And the other thing is why would they let a bunch of researchers sit in on sessions where they're discussing things, well, the answer is you have to pay an entrance fee. And that entrance fee is not money, is you have to make a contribution. You have to offer them something, you know, some expertise to give them training. And this is what we did. And it's I think we have to, at some point, we have to really look at, you know, the research methodologies that we're using and how can we judge whether this is valid. But at the moment, it is a fact. We have to, you know, we can't just sit as observers outside, which is often held up as the ideal. You know, we have to. It's what you would call participatory action research in the social sciences. And that's what we've now found is what we're increasingly doing. You know, if we want to get access to real participants out in industry, and so the companies will ask, you know, what can you do for us? So here it was like, well, you get the famous Professor Angela Sasse telling you about human-centered security. And then over the workshops, we'll also bring some examples of solutions and then discuss with the CISOs whether maybe they could help in their organization. The results here were basically very quickly got back to the same point. They listened really with great interest about human-centered security, and they kept using the term human-centered security. But it's the same as in the previous study. They thought about it as a bullet, you know, maybe this woman can give me the silver bullet for making my employees. How do I make my employees comply? Right? You know, how can I persuade them to follow the policies, you know, and do this? And you know, how can it, you know, do you have some tips for making the content of the security training more interesting? And you know, yeah. That's literally, that's really what they wanted. The other big topic was simulated phishing campaigns. Most of them were doing it, and we're running these simulated phishing campaigns, and they again blamed the ISO 27001 for it, because it says you should do this. I mean, you must do security training once a year, but it also explicitly recommends simulated phishing training. That is yes, yes, Emiliano, UCL. I know. I think for those of you who might have been following the literature, you know, the end is nigh. You know, the evidence is mounting up that it's not effective. Simulated phishing campaigns, you know, they don't make people any more able to distinguish between well-crafted phishing campaigns.
Make it worse in some cases, right? Can make it worse in some cases.
They even make it worse. The very big field study done by ETH, which was in Usenex last year, showed, you know, it makes it worse. Plus, what we've been documenting is the collateral damage around it that occurs, you know, that it actually really turns people more. And also, we've been able in one company to track the cost of just how much time and effort goes into configuring your systems and implementing it, you know, and then suddenly you're chasing down hundreds of email addresses, you know, if you don't have the perfect identity and access management system and have a super clean email, you know, list of email directory and things, like, you will be spending lots of, anyway, that is a talk in itself. Let's not go there. But they blamed against certification, but also they said is the board wants it. The board loves it. You know, because it's the only numbers we can give them. Was essentially, you know, basically that's the only thing where you put numbers in front of them, and they love to see that. Yeah. And you're not, I mean, we just, at some point we realized, you know, we should stop pushing, because they really, at the end of the day, they didn't really want human-centered security, and they didn't want to go there. And they weren't particularly appreciative of when we brought up examples. What I actually thought was very depressing was that actually in the conversations 3-4 times, some of them actually brought up really good solutions. that worked. So I give you one. My favorite was, they were all whining there and said, personnel department. Oh, personnel departments. There's idiots there, right? Anytime somebody sends them a PDF, that says it's a CV, they'll open it, and then one of them said, like, why are your personnel people getting emails, directly from applicants? We have a portal and everything, and if you want to apply to us, you have to upload everything through a portal. We scan the hell out of it, and whatever then ends up in the personnel department, be super secure and clean. Right? You look at it, this is not rocket science, this is just homework. But again, so curiously, and then I asked them, when we asked them at the end, whether those 3 or 4 good examples that colleagues have given, how many of them had picked this idea up and implemented in their own organization. They didn't do it. The other thing, though, that really, really struck me out of this is when you look at the tone and things, what you're saying is, they're just not happy. They're really showing the strain, they're people who've painted themselves in a corner. They're not getting they're constantly getting pushback from the workforce. They feel the top of the organization doesn't appreciate what they do and doesn't really support them. And yeah, that doesn't really make for a, happy thing, and here we come again. It's they make us do this, so I'm criticizing them for it, but I mean, it's not like that they sit there and do this and they go like, and it makes them happy. They actually themselves, they are suffering. They do realize it's not a good solution, and only some of them, basically look at it and say this is not working. Once we, when we train people, when we try simulated phishing campaigns, at the end of the day, our employees are more confused than they were before. But this thing about the strain, that they're showing, this is becoming, it's a theme, and I just thought, like, I'd go out and look a little bit in the trade press around it. And I just really picked a small, the ones with the best photos of of it. But this kind of, like people going like this is, yeah. And I'm going, if these are the people who are relying on, the fact that they are so stressed and offended, that makes me worried, right? That actually makes me worried. If you look at why is that? Yes, it's partly because I think they're just feeling stuck. They're feeling powerless to make the changes that would make security work better. And I would blame, I'll come to that later on. I think I'm absolutely now come to the conclusion I would blame company leadership for this, for company leadership for not engaging with this problem and not helping the CISOs to do this. The CISOs can find some solutions, but to, like, who should really help me, who could do this, shall we change the business process? Those kind of decisions are not decisions the CISO can take. That's the leadership. But it's also this unscientific nature of the practice and the job that's part of the problem. So Joseph da Silva, who did his PhD at Royal Holloway with Rickenback Jensen, he's a CISO himself and did his PhD part-time there, and has written a couple of really super interesting papers about this. And he said, your role in an organization is you're like a soothsayer for senior management. And that basically, it means, as long as your forecasts are reasonably, as long as what you're doing seems to be reasonably correct most of the time. But of course, it's also, you're being a bit like a shaman. Eventually, they expect you to, not just to forecast the rain, but to make the rain happen. And if you then can't make the rain happen, you're going to be blamed for it. And they do realize that, and that basically puts you in a precarious situation, and doesn't very happy, and it leads to alienation within the organization. Meaning they don't really feel secure, appreciated, and so on. Who likes that? The other thing that he's pointed out is when he first when he first started publishing, he's been using gender theory to organize to analyze the whole discourse around security, around security and what we're doing in security. And he's pointed out that it's the whole image, it's a very masculine, all the values, the norms, the self-image, the practices, it's all very masculine and militaristic. And that means you have to project strength and confidence. And that is very exhausting, particularly if you actually know that things aren't good, right? If you actually know that a lot of your processes, are really working so-so rather than particularly well. And it's one of the, so I think the rest of a lot of the research community sort of like reacted really quite to this whole, but I think having really engaged, I think he's right. And of course, it's a very overwhelmingly, it is a male environment, but it isn't just the fact that it's mostly men, it's more that the role that you're clinging to, is very male, and you're not really, it's not realistic. And the interesting paradigm shift that is supposed to, is going to happen, or that, Laura Koch, who's one of our PhD graduates from Royal University Bochum, is when she looked at organizations, and mostly sort of fairly born digital organizations where security was working quite well. And she said that is because those security staff there, really, they engage and work with the users, and they really, it's not a militaristic defend kind of thing, it's a care function, right? And the discourse, the whole position that you start from there is, I'm the security expert, let me help you do what you need to do securely. Not I'm coming in, I'm defending the organization and everyone follows my rules, right? And this fixing security together, it's also it's an approach that we've been advocating for a long time here with my student Jakobos Kolapos here at UCL. We published this paper of that fixing security together between security experts and users is the way forward. And also the whole practice of really getting evaluation cycles into what you're doing. You're creating a solution to keep something secure, then we should evaluate it and see, is it working? Is it keeping us secure? How much is it costing? And is the risk mitigation we're getting proportionate to what it's costing? Different, not just in terms of paying for security tools or services, but also in terms of time and money, and how stressful is it to do these things. And that kind of shift, I think, is about that we could really help. If we basically make clear, make this explicit, that is really what we're doing. And maybe, some cynics are saying, well, if we phrase it as a care function, if we project it more as a care function, that'll get more women interested in the job. And also, of course, with the corollary, like maybe we could pay them a bit less. Which is of course that's going down a track I don't like at all. But okay, so I've got two short studies on the auxiliary by Emiliano on the auxiliary workforce. So this is actually study 3, not study 4. This is developer security champions. If you're not familiar with the concept, is you are assigning a specific, well, think about it, it's about being like the first aider or the fire warden in an organization. So you're getting, in the digital space, you're getting this, the responsibility of, doing more training, learning more about IT security, and then keep also what you should do is there should be regular consultations and cycles with the security experts in the department. So they should work with their network of security champions. So the security champions themselves should talk to each other, support each other, and be networked, as well as supporting the colleagues in their own departments. But then they should also regularly work with the security experts. And this is in a big e-commerce company in Germany. We looked at the development teams or at the subsection of the development teams where they had rolled out a security champion program. And in this case, we did two things. We didn't just, we did our usual running around and talking to people and interviewing them, but we also they carried out an OWASP-SAM assessment in all of the teams that had this new support in form of the security champion. And there really isn't, if you look at the profile of the different teams, they seem fairly homogeneous. They're all fairly, again, overwhelmingly male, of course, software developers. From an age point of view, from their training, academic background, all fairly similar. But yet, when you looked at the OWASP-SAM criteria, there were huge variations between the five different teams that we studied, and particularly you can see in terms of like whether they were doing verification of their code. So there's clearly two teams that are doing very, very, so Team A and Team E doing very little at all, whereas B, C, and D were carrying on, and particularly the standout is Team D, where there's a lot of verification work taking place by all the developers. So clearly there is the champion there managed to really impress on them the importance of it. But it was just really, really interesting to see. So you've got this variability. Where does it come from? And it has a lot to do with, the lack of preparation of the poor security champions, because it utterly depended on what was the knowledge and skills they brought into this role with them. Because they'd not been given a training program, they'd been told to do the job. They couldn't, it wasn't like they volunteered for it. It was handed to them. They had no connection to the security experts in the company, so they had no regular consultation with them. It was just, it was literally, it was like sometimes I have this like picture of Jean-Luc Picard, where, make it so, right? That's at the top of the organization. They went like, security is important, developers, make it so, and we're giving you security champions, but then we don't give the security champions anything, and we expect them to magically, be able to do this. And of course, there was also no discussion about, we traditionally with software developers have this triangle, functionality, budget, and time, delivery time. And the discussion about where does now security fit in, it was really make it secure, but still deliver the same amount of functionality in the same time. And I think this is just, a fundamental thing that has to happen, is that leadership, needs to really start to allocate resources and time, and it needs to put security explicitly. I've been saying for over 20 years, security is not a non-functional requirement. If you want it, make it explicit from the requirements downwards, state it, that it's needed what you want. It should be there. It has to be there on an even footing with the functionality. And you don't want your developers to think about it differently. You want them to think about it as, quality aspects really are as important. It's it's not happening. And so the final one is possibly the first attempt to, in Germany, we have this system where an apprentice, the apprenticeship system is very, very common. And for most vocational, it is the vocational training approach. So they have spent 3 years, they're employed by a company, but there's external setting of the syllabus, of the skills they have to have. It's the Chamber of Commerce that does the examination at the end. They go to school for 1 or 2 days a week as well. And those, they were, when they're recruited into a big company, here again, this was like a very big company. And it's also one where I have to say is, that's one that has to deal with security, attacks on a major scale. They're in a lot of people's target particularly at the moment. And they said, okay, let's train the apprentices. And then the apprentices can become the champions, because the beauty is they don't just work in one department. Apprentices go around different departments, and they can then spread the security message. That was the idea the security experts in this company had. And they were running this 3-day workshop. And we said, great, we're working with them on another thing. Can we come? Can we what? And they said, yes. But of course, there was the usual thing. What are you bringing to the party, right? So our entrance fee in this case was that we had, particularly because we want, it's one of the hardest things in my experience in industry is to get a baseline measurement, to persuade them that before they rush off and do something, you need to take a before measurement. And we wanted this. We wanted to interview these apprentices before anybody had ever talked to them about security. We wanted to hear from them how they were actually approaching this whole thing. And so I said, fine, but what are you doing? And we said, fine, but what we can do is we can run a security myth-busting exercise to warm them up. So we gave them a series of, they put big sort of statements on boards, and they could go and they all went and rated them as true or false. And then there was a reveal, of course, at the end. We asked them to construct particular security problems using Lego. Some of you will be familiar with serious Lego as a method that's being quite extensively used. Lizzie Coates Kemp from Royal Holloway has pioneered this. And we did a pre-workshop interviews and a post-workshop survey with the apprentices. So overall, the workshop looked like this: very dense program over 3 over 3 days. And what you can see here is, motivational speech, yes, but also some really techie stuff, right? The police perspective on the topic of IT and information security. Well, anyway, so how did this work? They not just because we did it, but of course when the Lego came out, they basically bing, right? They actually, and particularly because some of these apprentices were doing they were accounting. They were accounting apprentices. There were female ones working in sort of very specific admin, training for very specific admin functions and so on. And of course, their confidence in their ability to take on this job was not very high. And suddenly, here, and actually it was very funny, the amount of models that basically produced that had a security person sitting very high up and looking over the whole organization, or sitting, one of them had the CISO sitting on a throne. But also on the right-hand side, you see here this, training, security training, full frontal. We're sitting there and somebody is telling us, and doing these things. It's fabulous. I love Lego. Between 18 and 21.
Yeah, so they're young.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most of them are. So what were the results? All of the apprentices we interviewed, they were willing, but they were very, very apprehensive. Would they be able to do this job? And really, frankly, if you're spending a high 5-figure amount on such an exercise, you should really think about what you're doing and you should plan it. And they hadn't. I mean, really, a lot of basically they brought in really technical experts to talk to them about things. also, frankly, so you've asked a really good question, 18 to 21-year-olds, and then you get these 50, 60-year-old security experts from, consultants or from the state, the Ministry of the Interior, state, talking about things that are really completely unrelated to, and a lot of, frankly, it's embarrassing because their knowledge was out of date. Right, they were still spouting the old password stuff, and and they were basically saying, like traffic on the internet is totally unencrypted and everybody can read it. Oh, we can come again, right? But that's just, why would you do that, right? You should really have a plan. And the worst thing was that they hadn't even planned as far is this whole idea that they are supposed to network and help each other and things. And they were really willing, and they went, yeah, let's have a WhatsApp group. We'll stay in touch, right? And then one of the security guys comes charging at them and starts shouting at them that they can't possibly use WhatsApp, to do anything with company business, and that they should network via the secure company email. Not working, right? But here it's again, I think we learned an awful lot. But again, re-emphasizing, I love this paper. It's 2016 paper from Andreas Poller, Laura Cox-Shedard, Can Security Become a Routine? In that case, it was an even more expensive intervention with developers where they, for over a week or so, brought in security experts to train the developers. But if you just do it as a one-off event, when the researchers went back 6 months later, they were exactly back, even though they were all fired up and wanted to do better and things. You need to change the working practice. You need to look at what has to change in your everyday working practices, right? And if the organization isn't doing that and thinks they can just basically do one big jamboree, throw out a lot of confetti and get everybody excited and motivated, it's not going to change security on the ground. Conclusions. Security experts are under pressure. We've shown this for the CISOs here. Joe Da Silva is showing it. There's some slightly older work from Sundaramurthy et al. In the US, which is also super important. That shows the burnout rates amongst SOC analysts. That they are, these are really good, highly skilled people, and they're quitting. After most of them have had enough after a couple of years. And this can't go on. Well, you've got to make those jobs into something that people want to stay and do something. Something like security champions. It's a way of, I think it's a mistake to think about it as a way of distributing the security work on the more widely on the cheap. It's not going to work if you don't really enable and support those people to do the job. And in all of these conversations, that the company and organization really should sit there and think about, where do we have capability or capacity that's related that we can bring to the task, that can support this, that can help with this transformation process. That's not happening. And I think that's the biggest failing of all. From a research point of view, I'd just say is, we've really still got to get more, we've got to get more onto the job of tracking any of the security interventions we do. We want to evaluate for effectiveness, but we've also got to look at the efficiency. How much workload is associated with this, and is that workload that the kind of people we have available can do, and can they do it for a long period of time? We need to think about that one, and how do we distribute it better? How do we also the whole friction that constantly happens? It's part of the stress and it's part of the workload. Stress isn't just because you have too much to do or not enough time to do your job properly. It's also if it's always, you're always going into the conversation with this like, it grinds people down. We can't afford to do this. There's I can't really go into this for lack of time, but there's also, people the cybersecurity professionals, they have to be quite careful for themselves, for their family. They are being cyber stalked on a large scale by some of the attacker forces. They do follow them around, they follow their every move, their spouses, their children. And that is also, it's not nice, and also if you don't have the resilience, then at some point, sometimes they don't even have to use it to trick you or to blackmail you or anything. Like, all they have to do is just look what we found tracking you over the past. We've known you, we've tracked you every move, we know everything. That's enough to freak a lot of people out and leave the profession.
Peter Davis was talking about that back in the risks days.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's gotten since then, he was the first one to openly talk about it, but it's gotten worse since then, what he's describing. And we need to think about how to protect our staff better. And yeah, I think lots of work for us to do in the future. Thank you very much.
Okay.